Hello and welcome to Equity in Museums. My name is Michelle Steen and I'm the manager of public programs at the Crocker. We're so glad to have you all here today for the third in our series. I want to start with our land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the Crocker Art Museum is on the traditional land of the Nisenan people, and California is the homeland of many tribes. We are honored to be here today and are committed to working with these Native nations as we move forward as an inclusive institution. I will add that the land the museum sits on is unceded territory and recognize that the institution of the Crocker was founded through and has benefited from colonialism. This was largely from wealth gained by the Crocker family from the transcontinental railroads and the lands the railroads crossed. We're including a link in the chat where you can learn more about two local tribes, including the Nisenan tribe of the Nevada City Rancheria, who continue to seek federal recognition. Please visit their site and support them in their efforts. We also want to thank the Shingle Springs Band of Miwok Indians and their Cultural Services Division, who have helped us to develop the Crocker's Land Acknowledgement and continue to share their insight, collaboration, and time. So some logistics, please use the chat feature to communicate with us and other attendees. You can directly ask Crocker Art Museum any logistical questions you have. Questions for the panelists can go in the Q&A. If you want to access live closed captions, click on the button at the bottom of your screen. Our chat will be pretty active, so if it interferes with the captioning, we recommend that you open the chat so it appears to the right of your screen. In the unlikely event that we are Zoom bombed, the panelists have agreed to continue with the discussion once we've removed those responsible. We encourage all of you to make the choice that is best for you and your well-being. Our community expectations, we ask you to assume good or neutral intentions, to show up however you can, and to know that every voice is welcome and valued here. In this space, we expect that people will have respect in their comments. Anyone using abusive language will be asked to leave or be removed. We don't anticipate this, but we want to be clear so everyone understands. Now, I'd like to introduce Jahmal Miller, who is on the Crocker Board of Directors. Jahmal is Assistant Vice President with Common Spirit Health's Office of Diversity, Inclusion, Equity, and Belonging. He will share his experience as a board member and how the board is engaging with these issues. Welcome, Jahmal.
Thank you, Michelle, and I'm glad to be here. Nice to see you all and to hear from you all virtually, and it's an honor to be able to participate in this important equity-focused series, particularly as it pertains to equity. Over the past 23 years or so, I've been a healthcare leader and have been focused on fostering health and racial equity within the context of health and human services. And one of the key ways by which we realize equity within the context of health and human services is how do we address where people live, learn, work, play, and pray? The ecosystem within which we all are nurtured in some way, shape, or form. And oftentimes that ecosystem is either set up in a way that's conducive to our health, mental health, and well-being. And sometimes it's not. When we think about the unfortunate realities of racism, oppression, discrimination, sexism, and a number of other social, economic, environmental, political, and even health disparities and inequities that exist in society that don't help our health, mental health, and well-being. So in order for us to make progress and to address many years of the systemic challenges such as racism and oppression, we have to have meaningful conversations. We have to have crucial conversations. And one of the ways by which we get there is understanding the great intersection and responsibility that the arts community has in helping us curate a society that is equitable, that is safe, that is fair, and that is just for all. And as I wrap up, I would like to just highlight Throughout the course of my career, particularly when I worked with a major hospital system here in town years ago, I used to manage the pediatric hematology and oncology program, or the children's cancer program. And it was during that time working with uh, staff, clinical and non-clinical staff, and social workers and child life specialists, and also meeting the kids, who were getting the care that they needed, and meeting with the families who were supporting these children. I came to appreciate and understand the therapeutic role that art, in the form of traditional art, whether it's painting or sculpting, music, and any number of ways by which art affects our lives. I came to see then that there was a very real role that the arts played in the healing of these children and their families as they went through very traumatic times in their lives. And there's no better time than now as we deal with the dual pandemic of racial injustice, as well as the pandemic of COVID-19 and how we've all had our lives upended, than to understand and come to appreciate through an equity lens the important role that the arts plays. And we are committed at Crocker Art Museum, our board, trustees, the leadership of the Crocker, and definitely the staff who you interface with, such as Michelle and many others. We are committed broadly and deeply to advance a racial equity agenda that values and institutionalizes at the Crocker equity, diversity, inclusion, and belonging. And we can't do that without our community. So we look forward to learning from you, to hearing from you, and the Crocker Art Museum continuing to be a beacon of hope and light that helps to usher our region into realizing what equity, justice, and fairness can really look like at this time. So I thank you, Michelle, for the opportunity to share these opening remarks, and I'm going to turn it back over to you as I look forward to hearing from our esteemed artists and presenters and panelists today. I know we have a great conversation to be had. So thanks again.
Thank you, Jahmal. We appreciate you being here, and I'm glad you're going to stick around for the discussion too.
Absolutely.
So currently the Crocker is preparing for its annual art auction to raise funds for operations. And one of last year's very successful pieces was contributed by the artist Jupiter Lockett. Jupiter is a Sacramento-based artist whose work focuses on the daily lived experiences of Black America. Painting from a child's perspective, his paintings are meant to give light to the humanity of dark-skinned people who originate from Africa, while also reminding people of the innocence that Black Americans are robbed of daily. He recently finished a residency in France and is gearing up for his second residency at the Imago Artist Residency in Sarajevo, Bulgaria. And in August, he had an exhibition at BIPOC Art Gallery in Sacramento. Jupiter's recent body of work is painted on cardboard, a visceral reminder of what it means to be Black in America. And I also know that he frequently paints all night. So tonight, Jupiter is joining us to share his work as a way to start this discussion. And then he will also be joining the panel discussion. So welcome, Jupiter. It's very nice to see you.
Hi, it's great to be here. So good to see you too. Yeah.
So we have some of your work here that we're going to pull up and look at, just a few pieces. Maybe you can walk us through and tell us a little bit about your process and what went into these pieces.
Yeah, so this piece is entitled Prayer Corner. This is one of the first pieces I painted when I got back from my residency in France. While I was out there, it taught me how to be still and how to really go inward and work things out. And so when I came back to Sacramento, that's when the pandemic just started to hit. And I was like, okay, we all had to go into our prayer corners. Whatever corners we were going into, we all had to go inward. And it forced us to deal with stuff we've suppressed since childhood or since whenever. And this piece was just an homage to the Black women specifically, with an emphasis on my mom, who have taken the time and who are taking the time to work it out, you know, still, she's caught off guard, it seems, almost, if you will. But, her feet are planted in that position of, I have to stay steadfast in this lane of healing. So basically for that. And then this is the Reapers, my Angels We Have Heard on High series, Act C. And this one was in the Crocker art auction for last year. And basically it's just, I wanted to focus on angels, but the other side of angels, the Reapers of death, but not just death, applying that to everything in life, reaping in joy, reaping in happiness, reaping in sadness, reaping in whatever. This painting specifically, the little diamonds on her shirt that are colored in represent the souls and the seasons that she has, plucked these people out of. And her little death kite, which I think is cute.
Can you tell us a little bit about the materials you're using? That's acrylic?
Yeah, acrylic paint.
You primarily work in acrylic?
Yeah, I want to use oils, but I don't have the patience, and I'm trying to work on that too. So it's a process.
Yeah.
This one is called Strange Fruit. I still have this piece, actually. It's this is the first piece I painted when I got back from France. I really, really love this piece. I have not been able to let it go. It's hanging up in my room. And this represents a Black man. Basically, who was it? Oh my God, I forget the names. There's so many of us who have been murdered in these streets by policemen. So one of these last few lynchings, if you will, where that policeman put his knee on that guy's neck, and it just like, we all got pissed off. And so I wanted to portray a Black man just naked, very, very violated. And the blue and the yellow represent the police lights of the car. The black and white represent the police tape around the car. And it's just a modern day lynching, without the rope, but it's showing you where he's going. He can't go anywhere. He's backed up into a corner and his limbs are all deformed or whatnot. And his penis is like on display because it's, they want to use you up. They want to just take you and just hurt you, and so just to make people feel uncomfortable, eerie and holy, haunting and beautiful, so I really, really love this piece. A Moment to Be is in a private collection out here in Sacramento. It was in a show in Boston last year, I believe, for a few months. And then it sold earlier this year. I'm sorry, late last year anyway. But A Moment to Be, another one of the pieces it's on cardboard. Another one that I painted when I first got back from France. And she's actually leaving her prayer corner. She's done the work, she's had her moment, and she's headed back out into the abyss. She's very heavy, but still light. She's very optimistic about what the future holds, but the little black tiles just represent our little black strides we've made thus far in this white, beautiful world. The blues on the walls. I love painting with blues because it represents to me the ancestors. It's a very calming, spiritual, royal color. And so it takes you in, it calms you down. But just to pay homage to all the Black women who just work and just get, used by daily life, just the mentality that mentality that we've been taught, that's not true, but it's just an ego, so yeah.
I want to ask about, I think it's so interesting. I'm already seeing some references in your work, biblical references, Strange Fruit, the song made famous by Billie Holiday.
Mm-hmm.
I see that piece and I hear the song in my head.
Mm-hmm.
When you incorporate references, is that something that is part of, like, they're already in your mind and you pull that into your painting, or does it come afterwards, or how does that work for you?
Normally it'll come afterwards. Like I'll have an idea of what I want to do, and then I just start working, and then kind of towards the end, like the title or the vision will come, like, oh, this is what I'm trying to say, or what the painting is actually saying. not even what I'm trying to say, it's what the spirit is saying. So yeah, I let it flow. This piece, I just finished this one. Well, not just finished, but it was one of the newer ones.
2021 on there. That's pretty new.
Yeah. Rust in Limbo. And it's actually going to be in the upcoming auction at the Long Beach Museum of Art. And I wanted to capture Blackness, Black people in this purgatory that we're in right now. We can't really go out, get dressed, but we have to get comfortable in this space, this space we've all been forced to dwell in. And so it's just basically a little girl trying to gain some type of semblance, some type of conscious, like, where am I? But she almost has her footing, if you will. But yeah, Rust in Limbo, just trying to get comfortable with this new way of living, basically. And yeah, that's
Thank you. Clearly, that's a lot to look at and process, and your work is just, I could look at it all day. So we'll be posting the link to Jupiter's website in the chat as well. Where else, anywhere else that people can look for you or possibly get commissions or anything like that?
Oh yeah, basically the the fastest way to get to me is my email, jupitertheartist@gmail.com. I'm working on my show right now, and I am accepting commissions. I have a few commissions that I'm working on, but so they can also reach me or view my work at my website, www.jupitertheartist.com. But yeah.
So much. I appreciate it, and we'll chat with you again in a minute.
Cool. See you soon.
So I think that it's important to acknowledge all of the work that's been done in the museum field by a lot of dedicated people for many years to make our museums better places. We are going to share again a comprehensive resource link compiled by Latanya S. Autry in the chat. I encourage all of you to click on it and save it for later, as well as to follow her and her incredible scholarship. I also want to acknowledge the work that a lot of organizations have been doing in Sacramento for several years to have these conversations and to spotlight lesser told narratives. One of those organizations is the Sojourner Truth African Heritage Museum, founded by Shona McDaniels, who has continued to provide art, culture, community, and education throughout the pandemic. They are having their grand reopening March 20th, and you can visit their Facebook page for more information. Links for that will also be in the chat. Please support Sojo. As an institution, the Crocker continues to face internal challenges for culture shift and accountability when it comes to racial equity and power imbalances. This work is always ongoing. We don't position the Crocker as a leader in this area, but we want to use our platform to be a community gathering space. As the Crocker works on its publicly stated commitment to equity, I hope these conversations will move the needle forward. A link to that statement is also going to be in the chat. We can also acknowledge that to be openly critical of high-profile institutions and systems can be a vulnerable place to be. Artists, educators, and cultural workers might fear a form of retaliation in that their work won't be shown or they won't get to engage with the institution and access the resources. We've seen many open letters and public calls for accountability help to lift some of the stigma in recent years, and particularly this year, but it takes energy and courage to take these steps, and I want to acknowledge that. So this program is the final in the series we've had, exploring the idea that museums need change from the inside out in order to be relevant and sustainable. Museums have suffered from a visible lack of representation in collections, staffing, boards, and much more, and a deeply embedded history of power imbalance and hierarchy. We hope this series has been a starting point to opening new conversations and changes for both the Crocker and other cultural institutions. If you missed the first two, they are posted on our YouTube page. You can also find all the resources we share in the chat today there when this recording posts. So please visit our YouTube page and subscribe. There's a link for that in the comments as well. Also, please join us April 8th for our Regional Native American Artists Showcase. We'll see work from several local artists and hear their stories. If you support the ideas that we are engaging with and what we offer, we hope you consider becoming a member or making a donation if you are able. Links for all of that will be in the chat. So now it is my great pleasure to welcome our panelists tonight. I want to welcome back Jupiter Lockett, also Estella Sanchez, Taylor Pannell, and Niva Flor. Estella Sanchez is the founder and executive director of Soul Collective and is an artist, activist, educator, and organizer. With an MA in Educational Leadership and Policy Studies, Estella has dedicated her life to empowering communities using the arts to cultivate the next generation of leaders, both locally and globally. Over the past 10 years, Soul Collective has served as a multicultural hub for Northern California and beyond, working to support and cultivate artists, creative businesses, community groups, and arts programming. Together with her collective, Estella has created an innovative co-op model that has inspired centers from Sonoma to Staten Island and has received numerous leadership awards, local and national. Estella is also the founder of Visions Manifesting. Taylor Pannell, artist Taylor Pannell is the founder of Tailored Mind Studios, which features artwork from artists locally, nationally, and abroad. The studio is a resource for study and to appreciate fine art, offering exhibitions, events, concerts, studio classes, lectures, children's activities, and more. The studio also has a small faux cafe, dance and yoga center, and clothing store. The clothing store offers unique styles by the brand Tailored Clothing, created by Taylor. Tailored Mind Studios takes pride in maintaining professionalism, managing collections responsibly, and providing quality service to the public. The studio's mission is to provide a safe space, educational opportunities, and creative outlets for all through art. Niva Flor is a founding advisory board member of the Black Artists Fund and the Chief Impact and Strategy Officer at the Sacramento Region Community Foundation. She brings more than 10 years experience in community engagement and interactive cultural programming, including workshop and curriculum development. Before joining the foundation, she served as the Community Partnership Manager at the Oakland Museum of California. Niva earned her bachelor's degree in music from Spelman College and her master's degree and PhD in ethnomusicology from the University of California, Los Angeles. Niva is a mother, daughter, wife, and wellness enthusiast committed to expanding access to culturally affirming holistic practices such as yoga, sound healing, and meditation that center on people of color and individuals in the community who are most in need. So all of those intros, I think, speak to all of the talent that we have here. And the Crocker has been lucky enough to work with each of you in some capacity over the last few years. I'd like to ask each of you to share a little bit about your background and your current work in arts and culture in Sacramento. So what are you working on right now? We'll start with Taylor.
We're good to go. Right now, I am actually working on many commissions, trying to get through those. Some book illustrations, some shoes actually, and some different canvas work. I'm also trying to get the studio together so we can now go online virtually because we will be doing virtual events and classes for 2021.
Niva, would you like to share?
Sure. Again, thank you, Michelle, Crocker Museum, for inviting me to be part of this conversation. Really timely, super important. Again, my name is Niva Flor, and I use she, her pronouns. And I'm one of the founding members of the Black Artists Fund. and as you mentioned, the Chief Impact and Strategy Officer at the Sacramento Region Community Foundation. And the foundation, one of our strategic priority areas is in arts and the creative economy. And so in my role, I have been working with a constellation of art organizations from across the region, Sacramento, Placer, El Dorado, and Yola, which is the foundation's footprint, in supporting arts education, supporting arts and cultural programming, but really also working in partnership with community to identify opportunities for more equity in the arts. And so I think, you know, it's kind of my background. As you mentioned, I came to Sacramento from the Bay Area. And while I'm not originally from the Bay, I think that's where I really cut my teeth in terms of community arts advocacy and arts administration to some extent. But my heart is here now in Sacramento, and I've been really excited, particularly through my work with the Black Artists Fund, to be able to connect to such a unique and magical, diverse community of Black artists who are doing really amazing things. Jupiter is one of our grantees. And, you know, I've been learning so much about where Black artists are in the region and how we can support them better.
Thank you. Estella?
Buenas tardes, everyone. Greetings. Thank you for having me here. I'm the founder of Soul Collective, a center dedicated to art, culture, activism, and community health. And we've been working in that area for 16 years and really working towards visibility of people of color in the region for 16 years in the arts, and making sure that our culture is being represented and that we have space to cultivate it and develop it with younger generations. We've currently been working for the last year around supporting community through the COVID crisis. So everything from working with the County of Health to creating art kits and self-care kits to send out to the community, as well as supporting artists in pivoting their work in order to make it sustainable as the world's changing and things are changing. And we're also doing work currently around supporting other groups and organizations through providing fiscal sponsorship, sharing resources, and looking at the way that as an organization, we ourselves begin to decolonize the way that we run our organization. So our organization has shifted from me as the executive director to a worker-directed nonprofit, working through collective leadership and non-hierarchical models, and really making sure that our core values are at center of how we operate, the work that we're doing, not only in the community, but within our organization. So that's been our last year during COVID and what we've been focusing on.
Thank you. And Jupiter, we got your intro, so thanks for joining us again. Estella, that's interesting because I think a lot of organizations, and maybe you're helping to lead the way regionally, like are doing that now. I know the Gender Health Center kind of went through a reorg and they're more of a cooperative model now. So it'd be interesting to know more about that. But kind of to kick things off, I want to get more specific about museums and galleries in Sacramento. So when we're talking about racial equity and diverse representation in museums and galleries, the conversation obviously doesn't stop at what's on the walls. Although having artists of color in those shows and exhibitions is really vitally important. So is having artists of color and people of color who are staff at all staffing levels, senior leadership, board members, patrons, funders, vendors, all these things. I'm wondering if each of you can speak a little bit about that, maybe where you've seen some successes in the area, what your thoughts are on this, how we make this happen. I know that's a big question.
It's a big question. I'll try to tackle that a little bit. I think that the stakes for BIPOC strategies of survival within the art world in general are at an all-time high right now, right? Particularly in the wake of where we are, the social moment and political moment that we're in. And there is a hypervigilant attention to representation and diversity of BIPOC artists in cultural institutions, in exhibitions, and to maybe some lesser extent, the inclusion of BIPOC communities and art workers in those institutions as well. And so I think in a lot of ways, this is really heartening and encouraging and inspiring and motivating, but I also think that many folks are coming to this conversation, particularly BIPOC communities, are coming to this conversation with much founded skepticism, right? We've moved through some of the cycles of being sort of in and out of vogue, or being maybe the new coconut water, as someone said one time. And so the question is, what are the changes that these conversations and this work, what are the changes that we actually want to see? Do they actually create space for people? Do they reorder institutional structures? And what are the terms of inclusion? What are the terms of equity? What are the terms of diversity? And I think that in often cases, the kind of work that BIPOC artists are called to do should expand beyond, just representing or sharing or educating, right? I think speaking from a place of other in an institution is a form of, unremunerated social and emotional labor that many non-BIPOC artists and art workers are not tasked to bear. So I think, as we continue to think about how to bridge conversations, how to bring folks in, how to call folks in of color into these organizations and other creative platforms, we really have to interrogate what we're trying to do in a meaningful way, and think about like what ultimately our change goal is, and not necessarily just reinforcing the status quo. And that's difficult. It's hard. It's not easy. It's messy. It takes time. It takes empathetic leadership. It takes transparency in a way that, as you said, Michelle, in your opening, can be very vulnerable for some and scary in some ways. But I think that there's a lot of opportunities to do that. And I think Sacramento in particular, those conversations are happening. I think there have been artists, as you mentioned, that have been really leading this work and trailblazing this work. It's great that you highlighted and mentioned Sojourner Truth Museum, because they have occupied this space in such transformative ways and have been bridging these relationships and conversations with larger institutions for so long. I look at examples like, and I mean, what the Crocker had been doing or is doing with Block by Block as an example of ways to engage community where they are, and potentially facilitate sort of a familiarity with the work of the museum, but also bringing the museum to where, to community spaces and where people are, which is a powerful, could be a powerful exchange as well. But I think it is a big question. And I think, again, what comes back to me is what are we taking the steps to actually make change? Or are we talking about taking the steps to make change? And those two things are very, very different.
Yeah. I, if I may, I agree with you a lot, Niva. What are the steps we're going to be taking, or you guys will be taking, these institutions will be taking after the conversations? There's a ton of conversations always happening around Black artists, and they always pop off around February. And so we get tired of that. Speaking for the artist standpoint, even for Taylor, I know she gets tired of that. Like, don't utilize this just for February. I mean, the whole year, Black folks keep y'all alive, the whole year with all of our inventions. So why just February? And we feel really unappreciated when that happens, because that's when people start to pay attention to us and give us opportunities that aren't even opportunities we want, basically. They're just like, oh, here, do this, it's exposure. It's like, that's not really good. That's not the change where we're trying to make a statement. We're trying to get into these major institutions and say something, say something very uncomfortable. That's what museums are for. You want to go to a museum and be inspired and be scared and be in love and be sad. You want to feel all those feelings, and if that institution is not giving back to its community of artists, of Black artists specifically, that are doing major things, it is kind of like a slap in the face, It even goes to like with pay. We get paid on a way, way lesser scale for certain things as opposed to our non-Black artist friends, And so it's all about the actions towards these reactions. What are the actions? What's going to happen after even this talk? What's going to happen? Will the Crocker have talks about starting to acquire works from local Sacramento artists, that are deemed worthy enough to be in a museum, or, who have even worked at the museum, like having critique sessions, you know what I'm saying? Or showing different works of Black art instead of just art from the motherland. We want to see art from today's Black artists like Carrie James Marshalls and more Kehinde Wileys and Betty Sars and Kara Walkers. Like, that stuff, it's happening now, and we want to see this new Blackness of this newness. We just want to see that happening now, I think. So, speaking for myself, but it's really about the action. What's the action that you guys are going to take?
I think that really ties into another question I had, which is like scholarship and arts criticism around BIPOC art and artists is just as important in primarily white museums and galleries, to avoid like tokenization and box checking. So for example, like a show featuring Black artists needs intelligent curation and intention, like co-curation with artists and scholars who are Black, but also cultural competence on the part of any curators who are white. How have you seen any positive examples of this in like PWIs that you can share, or any ideas for how we continue to advocate for this?
That's kind of like what I was going to touch on, because my biggest thing is visuals. We don't see people of color. We don't see Black skin in the ads, or even knowledge, like you said, grants and scholarships, but people in my community don't even know about grants and scholarships. I didn't even find out what a grant for art was until 2019. So I would like to see the word getting spread to the community about these things, or even being able to work with these organizations and these institutions, because there's many artists and community leaders who do these events and workshops. They do mental health workshops, art workshops, classes that they've been doing for years, just like the Sojourner Truth Museum. So I would like there to be like some type of communication to show other artists and other community leaders, hey, we're an organization and we're here for you as well. I think that's what's also missing in that.
Yeah.
Looks like we lost Estella, but we're working on getting her back. This is something that wouldn't happen in real life. She probably wouldn't just like walk off leave her chair, but thanks for bearing with us. Did either of you want to share an example, or maybe, in the last question, I know, Niva, you worked at the Oakland Museum for a while. Did you see any kind of positive examples of that type of curation? Or
So I think it was in 2015, the Oakland Museum received a pretty substantial grant from Irvine to really dive into community engagement practice and to refine our strategies around community engagement. And it was really where I stepped into my role there as the Director of Community Engagement, leading a team to design and co-create with community artists and partners. And it was a really interesting exercise. Well, number one, because we literally were tasked with, and it was something that we advocated for, and definitely that we wanted, was to kind of blow up the walls of the museum and take the museum into community spaces in meaningful ways. And one of the first projects that we did in collaboration with Brett Cook, who was a really respected artist in the Bay Area, and comes out of the social art and social justice practice, is to design a mural project that was literally designed to be on the walls of the museum, on the external walls of the museum. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with Oakland and where the museum sits, it's at an interesting intersection of sort of three very diverse neighborhoods. So it's sits right on the cusp of Chinatown and a predominantly Latino community and refugee community and an African-American community. And what even prompted us to get into this work was that after doing a pretty intensive landscape analysis of our visitorship, we went in with some assumptions that, obviously the community members that were closest to the museum would actually be ones attending. And what we saw was the opposite. And so here we are, a community cultural gathering place that was not actually engaging with the community that we were in. And so this project was really intended to lift up who the community had deemed their leader, right? Their arts advocate. And so Brett went out and identified, we put together listening sessions. Brett went out and talked to folks, and they came up with their list of who's important to them. Now, surprise, surprise, these are not the folks that you typically see highlighted and showcased in museum spaces. And so he took that information and then created these life-size portraits of these amazing change agents in the community, and then went back out and invited community members to actually help design, paint these huge portraits. So it literally had that humanistic community imprint on these big pieces of art that then he took back to his studio space and completed, and then it became a part of this community exhibition that was on the walls of the museum. So saying that in 30 seconds or less sounds like it was a flawless, seamless process, but in actuality, we hit so many logistical roadblocks, right? I mean, the things that you think would be the most simple, right, to do. I mean, we're a museum, we hang things on walls all the time. But it wasn't. There was so much logistical take in just getting permissions to hang the portraits on the wall. Then there was the timing and when the exhibition could happen. Again, not necessarily museum timing, but that was in line with the agenda, the community's agenda, right? Which looks different, feels different, timeline very different. And the process of it being an iterative piece of work. So not something that, he took off to a studio, sort of did on his own, but required as part of the design, that interaction, that engagement element added another layer. And so where I found myself was being sort of the translator between museum expectation, museum processes, museum policies, and what the community wanted. And I think it turned out to be great. And it brought a lot of visibility to, again, these amazing folks in the community and to the museum. But it was such a learning exercise around, what are we trying to actually do here? And are we actually creating the infrastructure to support this kind of work? We can't say that we want inclusive, diverse experiences and not create the infrastructure to support that. So I think, I'm sure there are examples of others that are in other institutions that are navigating these really difficult kinds of conversations. But again, for me, that was such a learning moment.
Thank you for sharing that. Um, yeah, I guess playing off of that, the Black Artists Fund sort of represents at least a newer model in the Sacramento area. And I think it's gotten a lot of good attention. But I'm wondering if you can share a little bit about that, and other panelists too, the experience you've had. It was kind of born out of this gap in funding and this need to recognize, celebrate, and support artists of color, specifically Black artists. So I'm curious to know what's next for the fund, and maybe some of the ways that's meeting those needs.
Sure. So the Black Artists Fund is really the creative brainchild of Faith McKinney and 7 other Black women who came together to respond to what we felt was and continues to be the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 and the pandemic on Black creatives, really with the goal of getting resources into the hands of Black artists quickly and with low barriers of access. Now, we launched this fund really at the very onset of the pandemic, but the data, completely backs us up. And so we were sort of a little bit ahead of the curve because what we knew and what we had heard anecdotally. But the data tells us that, particularly when we look at the arts sector in general, with maybe a greater emphasis on the performing arts sector, we are really one of the most vulnerable workforces, right? And many artists across the region are suffering from a combination of, just a fragile economic foundation, other losses of income, and to be honest, just lack of a safety net infrastructure, right? These are the challenges that we face outside of a pandemic and have only gotten worse within a pandemic. This is especially true for Black and African-American artists. And in the survey that the California for the Arts just recently put out, they talk about, the 100% of respondents to their recent survey who are Black or African-American said that, they had loss of income, which was much higher compared to some of the other ethnic groups. Over 40% reported that, they had issues with highest need related to rent loss and needing support there. Disproportionate access to CARES funding, right? So when we look at all of the federal resources that have been pouring into the region, there have been slight disadvantages in funding for African Americans. And then when you think about support from either private foundations and individual donors, right? African American artists were not getting the same kinds of support from local philanthropy or from private philanthropy. And so we launched this really in our best way forward as a call to action, but also as a way to think about some kind of stopgap measure to help get resources into the hands of folks who we know needed them most. And also in full recognition that we were doing this work in the midst of what, some might call a national reckoning, right? Around legacies of race and racial injustice and social injustice and systemic injustice against Black folks. So we put out a call and our community came together and rallied around this issue. And I will say, the outpour of support from individuals, from institutions, from organizations, whether it was in the form of, financial support or other in-kind resources, was really inspiring. And as a result of that, we were able to raise $59,000 in funding, which we were able to then grant out a little over $37,000 in grant support to over 70 Black artists. And again, this was something that we pulled together relatively quickly. There wasn't a ton of, we didn't have a super long runway to develop really glossy materials and a fancy website. It was really kind of DIY, but we did call together all of the creative talent of the folks that were on the advisory committee, and that's such a broad range. I mean, we have folks that are well position to help, design. And so it all worked itself out. But 60, over 90% of the artists that we funded are within the Sacramento region. So 60 of the 70 some odd grantees that we were able to support, with the remaining amount going outside of the region. And that's also a really interesting opportunity as well, because when we think about, the region and the arts sector, I see the creative sector as one of our greatest assets and our creative and cultural exports. However, when we think about what it actually takes to retain artists, we know that, we see artists leaving Sacramento, particularly artists of color, leaving Sacramento to go to other places to be able to build on their practice, to be able to, to grow and thrive. And that's really a concern to me, right? That's incredibly concerning. And so we want to not only invest in keeping our local artists here, which would mean that we need to create an ecosystem where they can not just survive, but actually thrive, right? And that looks different. And we have to start to change our thinking around what the value of arts looks like and what we're willing to pay for it. But also we want to connect the creative community here in Sacramento to a broader art community nationally. And so we saw this opportunity, even though the grants are really hyper-focused on supporting local creatives in the Sacramento region. We also saw this as a bridge opportunity to support Black artists and creatives outside of the region. And we're beginning to get more and more interest from outside artists who are now looking to Sacramento as this sort of safe place to be able to to grow their practice, to connect with other local artists. And so that sort of opportunity wasn't something that we thought about necessarily as we went in, but has been an interesting pivot in some ways for us. And I'll just say that, in terms of what we're doing now, I mean, we definitely want to continue to get dollars out, get money in the hands of artists. I mean, that is going to be an ongoing sort of mission for us. And so we want to continue to work with community and partner with our community to be able to do that. But what we were also starting to uncover as part of this learning process was the opportunities to also build capacity for local artists. And I think, Taylor, you said it best, that, oftentimes artists are not aware of opportunities, whether they're grant making or whether they're,
Yes.
to be able to do that. We want to build more awareness around, where money is so that people can access them, but also to be able to support in areas around critique, right? So, having your artwork critiqued and not just sort of, which is an important process and element of artistic practice. We want to help in helping to build skills around grant writing, right? We know so many artists that are great at making art, but sometimes don't always know how to write a grant. And it's not necessarily an intuitive skill, right? So how do we build capacity for local artists, Black artists, to be able to do grant writing and to learn how to access not just local dollars, but national dollars as well. And then I think, and I'll say this and then I'll stop talking, then the other piece is really, how do we build that connective tissue between artists? So we understand that so many artists work sometimes in isolation and are not aware of other Black artists who are doing things in the community. And we want to create connection points for those artists to be able to collaborate and work together and partner and exchange, have a learning exchange, There's so many opportunities for folks to, again, to be able to build and learn and grow together. And so we see the Black Artists Fund as a kind of a hub for where those kinds of relationships and those networks can be built, and again, to encourage those relationships to continue. And we've already started to see that happen organically with grantees working together, but also opportunities for the fund to help facilitate those kinds of partnerships as well. So yeah, a lot of work happening on that front, really exciting. And we're here to stay, and we definitely see this as not only just a value proposition in terms of what does it mean to support local artists, but it also is it is a reminder that if we're not investing in our art community today, what does that say for the future of our region?
Yeah, amen. I think there's a lot of questions coming in that are addressing these things. But one thing I wanted to share, and then I want to get kind of Taylor and Jupiter's feedback on this, is we have this like chart showing kind of an example of the long documented racial inequity when it comes to arts philanthropy and funding for artists that you've been talking about, and how it's more complex than just who gets what, it's how they get it, it's the resources needed to even know about the funding. But then there's structural issues like maybe who are the philanthropy leaders, who are the executive staff and board members. Smaller organizations have lower capacity, that kind of thing. So this report that we're sharing is to explain it a little bit. It came from this, a 2017 report from Helicon Collaborative based on some recent data that shows that nationally, 2% of all cultural institutions receive nearly 60% of all contributed revenue. And so that 2% number represents cultural groups with annual budgets of 5 million or more. So those are the larger organizations, and they're getting the bulk of that funding. Very few organizations of color or cultural groups based in low-income communities are included in this large budget group. There's a lot of different factors, like I said, but I'd like to know what, and I think, the other thing I wanted to say is, we're seeing local trends kind of parallel these national trends, but one example in this massive survey they did that was an exception to this was in San Francisco. And San Francisco had 2 decades of sustained private and public collaboration to actually address this. So that's 20 years of working towards promoting actual cultural equity in whoever has access to funds. So their ratio was more 32% of cultural groups that were smaller were receiving 32% of the funding. So it was actually a much more equitable model. I want to know a little bit from Jupiter and Taylor what your experience in Sacramento has been with that as an artist going through the pandemic. If you can just kind of share maybe what the last year has been like for you, and how all of these numbers and all of this data, like how does that play out in your life,
Well, I mean, last year, it's actually been pretty good. I can't complain like that because Black is hot right now. And so I've been getting a lot, I know Taylor has too, been getting a lot of commissions, a lot of opportunities just because of everything going on with Black lives. As far as grants and having access to money, that didn't happen until Black Artists Fund was created, until I knew about Black Artists Fund. I had no idea about grants, fellowships, any of that, how to even write a grant. Now, like Black Artists Fund, they've given us local Black artists like a new vision of hope, if you will, because they're giving us all these opportunities now. Like hey, you want to get your stuff up on here or whatever, what have you. But it's all about Black Artists Fund to me. like if they are the beacons for us Black artists out here. Because people never really took us seriously until these ladies came together and like, hey, we want to actually make a change and set something up for you guys to actually live on, you know, and make money off of and get clients. Like I was about to leave Sacramento because there was no money. No one was taking me seriously. All of my collectors are overseas and in different cities outside of Sac. And it's like, well, you got to go where you're shown love, you know, where they appreciate you, you know, why stay here? So that was the only hard part I would say, is getting non-Black people to see the worth in my work, until the Black Artist Fund popped up out of nowhere. It was like, hello, here we are. We have all these different tools for you guys, you know. I love the fact of critiquing art. And I would love to see more of that, more of us Black artists come together and just talk about all of our art. You know, just critique is very good, and it helps you get to deeper levels of your craft in creating. But I could say last year has been good as far as funds, because Black Artists Fund once again, and the commissions, it just people, you know, everyone wants to be a part of the main thing that's hot, and that's BAF. They're like, oh, what's that? Oh, okay. Oh, you got that? Well, can I reach out and, you know, to them and get a commission from you through them? Sure. You know, it's all reciprocity, but yeah, I may be saying the same stuff over and over again, but it's, as an artist who paints at like 3 a.m. to 7 a.m., 8 a.m. in the morning.
Yeah.
You know, and I wake up late, and so I'm like, oh, I missed meetings, I missed everything. What? Oh, okay, there's the grant available, cool. But you know, they given us a comfortable platform to express our most deepest insecurities through the Black Artist Fund. So
I agree. I like to piggyback if I could.
yes, please.
On top of the Black Artist Fund, I feel like the Brick House Gallery, Oak Park Brewery, Slim and Huskies, Kevin Johnson, they all reached out to me last year, which helped me, but those are also Black businesses in Sacramento. So they do know the struggle, they do see our efforts. And so they also, you know, contact us and reach out to us, which I am also grateful for, which is why I also can say that last year was not very hard for me. I'm a person of solutions, and my solutions might be simplistic for some, but I feel like workshops and classes that are advertised to the community of that grant writing, those critiques, the grants that are available. After the Black Artist Fund came out, then I had my non-Black friends and my non-POC friends, or my POC friends saying, hey, there's this grant. Hey, do you know about this grant? Hey, you should study this grant. Oh, you don't know how to write a grant? Well, let me help you. I can sit down with you. But until all that occurred, you know, then I was seen. Oh, you don't know about grants? I thought you knew. How am I supposed to know? This is my background. Really? That's crazy. I knew about grants when I was such and such age. You know, we don't have those experiences for our community or our families to even educate us on things like that, because our families are working. Our families are struggling. They don't have the time or even sometimes the patience to sit down with us and educate us on these things, because we don't have that what is that word that people like to use? Privilege. There you go. We don't have that privilege. We're lacking in a lot of that privilege right now. So Black Artist Fund is giving us that privilege. Oak Park Brewery is giving us that privilege. Shona Mae Daniels has been giving us that privilege for years on years. And so since we are hot right now, we're getting some extending a privilege. In my experiences, some people aren't happy about this privilege that's been given to me. When I was doing the mural at the Ali Yusefi Square, there was a group of non-POC people sitting at their table that were older. But they were like, oh, I don't see anybody of white people on that storage container. And I just looked and I turned, and in my head, I'm like, oh, and you see how it feels. I was told that I wouldn't make it because all I did was draw Black and POC people. But look where I am now, because I am who I am, we are who we are, we're gonna be seen. How I feel like we can continue to be seen is not really expected from what's gonna come from the museum. Yes, I would like the museum to step up and do stuff, but honestly, it's about what we do. So Black Artists Fund, Oak Park Brewery, Slim and Huskies, there's so forth and so on. It's really about them making the waves and accepting ourselves. Because until we can also accept ourselves and seek out information from our own communities or even to Crocker Art Museum, then we also won't be taken seriously. I lack a lot of knowledge. Even to this day, I lack a lot of knowledge. But I reached out to Jerry Simpson. I reached out to Shona McDaniels. I reached out to Barbara of Brick House and I asked them, can you sit down with me and can you educate me? Because I want to do this, that, and the other. Can you let me know? I brought my journal, I sat down. But even then, we lack the confidence and even doing something like that. And we don't even know we can do something like that. I have people confused that I even did an internship at the Crocker Art Museum because they didn't know that was possible for someone like me. Even when I worked there as an intern, they were confused. Even when I got hired on as a teacher later, they were confused. Not all the time. They got used to me after a while because I was there for so long. But you know, it's brand new. It's weird for a lot of people until they're like, okay, you are human. Because we're not deemed as that. We're not seen as human. We're not seen as alike, unfortunately. But when they do see us as human, they do see us as proper or educated or whatever you want to call it, then they take us a little bit more seriously. But I would like to see us be taken seriously without having to put on or to speak away or to present ourselves. We are who we are. And I want to be taken serious for that. And I feel like institutions like the Crocker Art Museum or other galleries to see us and take us for who we are and give us a chance before, you know, any prejudice, then I feel like we can get further along. But I'm gonna step off my soapbox.
It sounds like you're talking about breaking down that white supremacy culture and deprioritizing that, calling it out, and then saying, how do we get rid of this? But also the other part of it, like you said, and like you've talked about, Niva, is uplifting and building capacity for the work that's already been being done. You know, so I could talk to all of you forever, and I have a million great ideas that I wrote down that I hope we can continue to work on. But I want to kind of close out this talk with a question for each of you about something that you're celebrating right now, a success that you're seeing, something you're excited about in your work or in the community. And just if you can share that and offer that hope and that joy to people listening right now.
I'll say that, you know, I think in light of COVID, and I want to think that there might be some silver lining to all of that, as difficult as this time has been for all of us. I think that the good news is that I have seen collaboration and partnership happen in really powerful ways, that we might have gotten there at some point, but that the pandemic has definitely pushed us to get there a lot quicker. I think when I look at some of the larger institutions in the region, you know, how they were pivoting to bring services online, bring art practice online, democratizing accessibility around those products has been really powerful, particularly when we start thinking about accessibility issues, right? And getting into the homes of people that may or may not have entered into that space. So I think, you know, that kind of innovation has been really amazing and powerful to see. I've also seen art organizations, you know, pivot into other spaces related to COVID relief and recovery that have also been really powerful. So really putting their work into action and, you know, working to transform their art spaces, or, you know, to be, or spaces to be, you know, kitchen incubators to help feed those who are in need, or delivery of those food products to folks who are in need. Looking at some of the work that organizations, and I'll just kind of, I mean, these are organizations that are coming top of mind, that are like Miss T and her organization to really help empower young folks to learn how to build those critical skills to actually fill the digital gap that many local organizations were confronting when it comes to bringing their services online. So, you know, when we think about all of the social media platforms and, you know, TikTok and, you know, social and Instagram, these are spaces where young people already live. And so she has been working with Studio T has been working with young people to train them, right, which is a definite workforce development opportunity and pipeline, to train these young people how to not only learn these skills, but then to work with organizations to help them bring those services online and to fill those gaps that they were looking to fill in light of being in this digital space. And then other organizations like 916 Inc., who have been working to you know, really look at those social, emotional learning opportunities as young people are feeling more incredibly isolated and disconnected from their friends and are disappearing literally from the school systems, right? We just don't know where some students are because of, you know, not having lack of access to technology, or not, you know, having to share their computer with 3 or 4 other siblings in their home. We know these are real issues that the arts community has stepped in to help support. And I think in that spirit of collaboration and partnership, I see that there's real opportunities for more aligned partnership. I hope that it inspires. Equity in the arts is such a critical issue. I hope that it gives us a seat at the table in other social sector conversations around equity. I think art is often left out of those conversations. And I see that there might be opportunities to bridge more partnership between private and sector, with philanthropy, with government, with you know, art and cultural organizations in the region. So, you know, I think that not only do we need to create space for people to have a seat at the table, we need to make the table bigger. You know, right? Like we can't expect everyone to squeeze in at a teeny tiny table, right? We can do that. We can build a bigger table. And I think that's the inspiration that I'm taking out of the moment. Let's build a table. Let's invite more folks to the table. And let's see where we can go from there.
Yes, I love that, Niva. That's a bigger table. Yes, we got all this redwood around us. Like, what are we doing? I'm looking forward to growing as an artist, as a human. I'm so glad this pandemic happened, because really it's forced all of us to grow in so many ways for the better. I'm looking forward to Bulgaria in September and Greece in October, my residencies, and my new series that I'm working on, my show, which is really getting on my nerves. Taylor understands this. I'm at that point where I'm just like, I'm over all these paintings, please. But that's what's keeping me sane. That's what's keeping me here, keeping me focused, you know. And I'm very grateful to have shared this experience with all of you on this panel. Taylor, I definitely respect you. I love your art. I love your swag, how you hold yourself and move through the community. Same with Niva. Oh my God, and your little baby, why is he the cutest? Oh my God. I can say that with Black Artists Fund, they have allowed Black artists in Sacramento more opportunities outside of the month of February. And that's what I'm appreciative for. Like, it keeps on going, not just in February, it just keeps on going. So I'm grateful for that. And to talk to you, Michelle, this was really great.
I'm actually grateful for, you just made me think of it. I wouldn't have known all these Black artists if it wasn't for Black Artists Fund. Jupiter, I've seen your work, but had no idea who you were until the Black Artists Fund. I'm grateful for the experiences that I've had, the opportunities that I was given, and I'm looking forward to the new experience with my studio, creating new content, whether it be in person or virtual, the new artwork that I'm creating. After I finish all these wonderful commissions, I'm going to be putting that down and start doing originals again. So I can't wait for that. And I can't wait to just enjoy life. I think we all forget, even though we're artists, we have this hustle mentality. But I look forward to taking breaks and taking time and taking bubble baths and living my life to the best of my abilities, and know that I can, I will, and I will continue, but I also will be able to sit down when I need to.
Thank you. I think that's a good note to finish on. I want to recognize we did lose Estella, but something I would say that's exciting and positive is the initiative that Soul Collective has done in terms of media literacy for youth. And so I think she had a little issue. I guess they cut out the power in her neighborhood. So I'm sorry we weren't able to hear from her, but please visit Soul Collective's website. All of the links that we've shared, check out Jupiter's work, see what Taylor's doing, see what Niva's up to, all of that, and the Black Artists Fund, support that fund, please, as well as Sojo. So I just want to thank everyone so much for coming to this, and really to thank all of our panelists for giving their time and energy. Like I said, this series is really meant to be a starting point. We want to hear from you. What are your ideas, your critical questions? I encourage all of us to hold the Crocker, our board of directors, our senior leadership, our staff, our members, all stakeholders, hold us accountable to how we are furthering equity in the museum and in the arts community. And I hope that you'll do this for other arts organizations in the Sacramento area. Think about how you can contribute to this dialogue and this movement, and how we all can. So stay tuned for more programming like this. Like I mentioned, next month, April 8th, we have the Native Arts Showcase. We are also planning a Black Artist Showcase in August. So please check our website for more information. I, again, have been Michelle Steen. I want to thank you for joining me, and I hope that you all have a very good night. Thank you.